Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar of introducing the first quarter results of the year 2021. Today, attending on the company side are CEO Paavo Nõgene, Member of the Management Board Harri Hanschmidt, and Financial Director Joonas Jost. As always, the agenda includes a presentation of the results, which is thereafter followed by question and answer session. It is possible to ask questions during the webinar by writing your question in the question box on the right-hand side of the screen. But we still have to start with the questions that we have received before the webinar. Now, for the first quick introductions, I would give the floor to Harri, please.
Thank you, Joonas. Thank you for tuning in to the first quarter webinar of 2021. My name is Harri Hanschmidt. I'm a board member for Tallink Grupp, and I've been with the company for 12 years. I will go through the current status of the business and the results of the first year, and after that I will give word to Joonas. Tallink is the leading European provider of leisure and business travel and sea transportation services in the Baltic Sea region. We own a fleet of 15 vessels. We, in a typical year, operate 7 ferry routes. This year, unfortunately, 3 of these routes are suspended. We also operate 4 hotels, 3 of them in Tallinn, 1 in Riga, and currently 3 hotels are closed until the 2021 high season. One of the hotels, the Tallink City Hotel, is going through renovation that is almost ready. Last year, our revenues were 443 million euros, and we transported 3.7 million passengers and 360,000 cargo units. We have an asset base of 1.5 billion, and that is mainly the vessels. We have around 4,000 employees, and our Club One loyalty program has 2.8 million loyal customers. Next slide, please. Yes. The COVID-19 impact of the transported passengers has now been in full effect for already 12 months, or 12 months, and we can see this has had quite a devastating effect on the passenger numbers. And the Q1 2021 is one of the toughest quarters for us because it is the typical low season, but we now also faced the second wave of the coronavirus and the restrictions to travel that is amounted to the government restrictions. Next slide, please. So we have taken different steps to keep providing safe traveling, and we are focused on flexibility, costs, and liquidity until the situation improves. We follow strict hygiene measures on the vessels and provide safe travel environment. We also offer corona testing between Tallinn and Helsinki on the vessels. We have temporarily suspended ships and hotels and actively ensure the necessary liquidity for the company. We have scaled down non-critical costs and investments from IT to advertising, pretty much everything. So the cost savings from previous implemented measures will be seen in this year's result as well. We have applied for various support measures that the governments on the main markets offer. We will propose no dividend on the annual general meeting, and we are postponing investments and taxes when possible. We also continuously negotiate with our financial institutions to amend and prolong the waivers of financial governance and to postpone principal payments under the existing loan agreements. Next slide. The 2021 first quarter highlights and key facts. Well, it's obviously the extensive impact of the COVID and the suspension of the cruise ferries and even stricter restrictions imposed by all the governments in the region. We have activities toward long-term sustainability. We continuously control the cost and ensure maximum efficiency and savings from previously implemented measures. We opened one more Burger King restaurant in Latvia, and there has been legal action against the Port of Tallinn filed in the amount of 15.4 million for a damage compensation claim for abusing the dominant position on the market for provisions of port services in Old City Harbour. Next. So the first quarter result has been affected by the crisis, and the passenger numbers are down 82.9%. The cargo units are down 14.5%, but here we have to keep in mind that some of the long cargo routes, or routes that also transport cargo, like Tallinn-Stockholm and Riga-Stockholm and Helsinki-Stockholm, are not operating, so the cargo results is still fairly stable. The revenues affected are down by 65%, but the bottom line is only slightly down, as the first quarter every year is the toughest quarter. And the capital expenditure 4.2 million, so we are doing the necessary servicing for the vessels, but are not doing any other investments like public areas or upgrades or etc. So we do the bare minimum to keep the ships in good shape during that time. Next slide, please. The 2018-2019 quarterly seasonality breakdown shows our seasonality. Unfortunately, in the past years, this is not the normal situation, so the numbers don't really reflect the seasonality anymore, but we believe that when the crisis eases up or the situation improves, so will the regular seasonality also return. Next slide. And here we can see also the seasonality on the profit level, and on a regular year, the first quarter has always been negative, where we also do the most dockings and servicing of the ships. 2018 we see minus 20 million, 2019 minus 25 million, and so this year we can also see a negative number. But regarding the progress of vaccination and the negative trend of new infections, Finland is in a very good situation, and then Estonia is improving, and we believe that the situation will improve. Thank you very much. I will give word to Joonas Joost now.
Thank you, Harri. So to have a little bit more detailed look into the numbers, the financials. So first looking at the sales, and as said, during the quarter and in comparison to last year's quarter, the revenues were 100 million, even slightly more than 100 million euros lower. And most of that decrease came from lower restaurant and bar sales and shop sales, and also ticket sales, as these are the parts of business related mostly to the passengers, and which typically make up most of the revenues. The sales of cargo business was to some extent still also affected by the COVID situation, although not as much as the passenger business. From the fact that we were missing 3 long distance routes, so the routes from Stockholm to Helsinki, from Stockholm to Tallinn, and from Stockholm to Riga, we obviously had also less possibility to carry cargo, and also the market still is affected to some extent by COVID, and there is also a diet price competition which influenced the result in this quarter. There was slight decrease in the chartering revenues, which relates to the amendment of the charter agreement back in which came into effect from Q4 2020. And if we look at the structure of the revenues in the first quarter, then clearly it is not a typical result for us. A typical result would be about half being restaurant and shop sales, with the ticket sales being closer to 25%, and cargo in off-season quarter maybe closer to 20%. So this time around, we can see that the biggest part of the revenues came actually from the cargo business. When looking the development by routes, then the biggest decline has come from the Finland and Sweden routes, where we continue to operate only the Turku-Stockholm route. And the key difference to last year is that obviously the passenger side of the business is missing, and particularly on that route, the business is more onboard spend heavy. So this also correlates to the development seen in the last graph with the decline of restaurant and shop sales. Estonia-Finland route is the second segment where we lost in year-over-year comparison the most sales. This comes down to the fact that it is typically our best performing route, and simply the comparative base is high. So even though we continued operating 2 shuttle vessels, we did not manage a good result. But of course, we did not have the operation of Silja Europa on the route this time around, so that also contributed to the decline. When we're looking at the Estonia and Sweden route, then this year we only operated 2 cargo vessels on the route. So last year also 2 passenger cruise ferries were operating, so the decline represent the absence of the cruise business. And on the Latvia-Sweden route, we did not have any daily operations, so the 2 cruise ferries were suspended, and the difference arises from simply the fact that we did not operate the route. When looking at the income statement, then the revenue is down in Q1 21 by more than 100 million euros, but the cost development was somewhat better. So overall, if we look at the either the EBITDA or the net result, then in the year-over-year, the decline is not that steep, and the results are actually more comparable to the last year result, which still until mid-March represented a normal period of operations. The cost of sales in Q1 this year, 74 million euros, is down by 52%. Obviously, a big portion in this group of costs are the costs of goods sold, which have declined together with a decline in sales. But at the same time, it also includes a substantial portion of depreciation and amortization expenses, which are which are fixed costs, basically relating to the assets we have. So there is no direct control over decreasing these costs in the short term. If we would exclude the cost of goods sold and depreciation, then actually the cost of sales was down even more by 56%. The administrative and marketing costs, 50 million euros, are down by 45%, and here it also represents the fact that there were effectively no advertising costs in this quarter, as there was extremely limited operations. The 5 million euros on the other operating items row is support. Effectively, entirety of this is support from the government, and it mostly relates to the Finland-Sweden operation. In terms of cash flows, as shown in the previous slide, the EBITDA was negative, so from the operating environment was tough. So not only was it a low season period, it also was very tough, and the toughest COVID period for us so far. So that affected negatively the development of operating cash flows. In addition to that, typically the first quarter is a relatively tougher period for Tallink in terms of the working capital development. And in addition to the seasonal pressure, which would typically be in Q1, then this year we also did not have the typical buildup of bookings and prepayments for the summer traveling. So for those reasons, the operating cash flow was negative 22 million euros in this quarter. When looking specifically the capital expenditure, then this year represents quite a steep drop in the investments. When in last year we still had the vessels being in dock and receiving both more extensive technical investments, but also into onboard facilities, then this year's investments are really reflecting the most critical technical maintenance and improvement works which needed to be done. So as a result, the free cash flow negative 22 is comparable to the last year's result. There were some debt service in the first quarter, but we also made use of the overdraft facilities. So overall, the net effect in the debt financing was positive 19 million euros. The interest costs, quarterly interest cost, remained at 5 million euros. And in the first quarter this year, as last year, there were no dividend payments or dividend-related tax costs. In the balance sheet, at the end of the first quarter in 21, the non-current assets 1.4 million euros. Mostly of this represent ships, and they remained at high and comparable levels to the previous years, previous years. The current assets were somewhat lower, representing the lower level of both receivables, but also the lower inventory levels. Cash balance remained comparable to the last year situation at 15 million euros. What has changed from the last year, or even somewhat from the end of the year, is the level of the interest-bearing liabilities. As we throughout 2020 we took on new loans and had grace period for the principal payments, and as shown in the previous slide in the cash flows, the net effect from debt financing was positive. So the level of interest-bearing liabilities and also net debt increased during the quarter. The net debt EBITDA ratio is currently high, and as it was also at the end of the year. Equity asset ratio also remains close to the level as it was at the end of the year, still a fairly decent level. And the book value per share at the end of the quarter was 1.02 euro. The long-term bank loan balance amounted to 572 million euros at the end of the quarter. So this represents 7 loan agreements which have different maturities, falling within 1 year to 8 years. The amounts of overdrafts which were in use were 53 million euros at the end of the quarter, and the amount of unused overdrafts amounted to 82 million euros. In addition, there are currently 2 loan agreements which have been signed but not yet drawn. The 198 million facility from KfW IPEX Bank relates to the last installment payable to the shipyard for the vessel MyStar. And there is also 90 million euros undrawn amount from the 100 million working capital loan from the Nordic investment banks. And as Harry said, there are ongoing negotiations with the financial institutions to postpone the principal payments under the existing loan agreements. What has happened now after March, so in this month, and what we see will happen is that in June we look to open 2 new Burger King restaurants, and there are ongoing preparations still to open 5 more Burger King restaurants later in the year. In late spring, we expect to complete the large-scale renovation of the Tallink City Hotel, and the reopening is planned in June 21. And in terms of the operating environment and the COVID situation, so we currently see that the vaccinations are progressing and providing a positive outlook for recovery of the traffic between the countries. But still, right now, basically all the fortunes hang on the development of the virus, with the vaccinations, and also the state's decisions regarding lifting of the travel restrictions or timing of the lifting of travel restrictions. But overall, the management expects that the passenger traffic between our key route, Estonia and Finland, will recover quite rapidly after the restrictions have been lifted. So this concludes the presentation part, and now we are going to proceed to the questions and answers. And we'll start firstly with the questions that were sent to us prior to the webinar. So the first question is, what is the management's base case scenario for the reopening, a full one or with limited capacities? Is the company considering voluntary self-imposed restrictions in terms of passenger capacities? Paavo.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Paavo Nõgene, I'm CEO of the Grupp. First of all, we see good improvement in our home markets, Estonia, Finland and Sweden, especially with the vaccinations. We know that Sweden are going to make 500,000 vaccines per week in the next months, which gives us a quite good outlook that the situation in Sweden would improve in near future. In Finland, the situation is very good with elderly people. My understanding is that more than 80% from 70 plus age people are already vaccinated, and this is very important because if we take into account who need the hospital help, then elderly people mainly. So when this elderly people vaccination is in so good shape, then most probably government can lift the restrictions also in near future. And this in Estonia, we have more than 300,000 people already vaccinated. It's going quite well, and as there are now already enough vaccine, then government decision is that from 17th of May, actually Minister of Social Affairs said that from 17th of May, everyone who want can get the vaccine in Estonia. So in the coming months, we see a good improvement with vaccinations. Secondly, we know that one Estonian company already launching tomorrow or beginning of next week a new app, which will be the vaccination passport digitalized version, and we know it's they are working also with other countries. So when the European Union Green passport solution will be available, then at least in Estonia there are already the technical solution for that as well. So we believe that traveling between Estonia and Finland, example, can use this system as soon as the governments are ready to accept vaccination certificates or certificate that you have had COVID in last 6 months or the negative COVID test result. Estonia is the country right now to where you can travel without any restrictions when you are vaccinated. So we hope that this good practice will be acceptable also near future in Finland and other countries. But regarding the scenario of the reopening, of course, we will do it step by step. We already have said that we are not going to open this year, example, the Riga-Stockholm route. We haven't made yet any decisions regarding the Tallinn-Stockholm route. Are we going to open it or not? This depends from the vaccinations and situation in Sweden. If we are not able to open the route latest in July, then it's most probably closed until beginning or until the next spring. But let's see how the things are going. Firstly, we believe there will be opening for the cruise product for Finnish market. We're going to most probably will announce next week. It will be the quarantine-free cruise, and we're coming out with some news for the domestic traveling next week for the Swedish market as well. But we analyzing the situation day by day. We are not going to make any decisions where we see that it can gain to us more negative result. So our aim is to reopen the routes only when they are we are going to use also temporary working agreements where possible. So, example, in Estonia, where we have on the payroll less than half from our normal sea personnel, then we are not going to hire them back we are not going to hire them back with the full-time agreements. We are going to hire them with temporary agreements, and when we see that we can't operate some routes, example, longer than summer, then it's easier to end also, finish also their contracts. So some news is coming out next week regarding our openings, but all the openings will take place in June and July, not before. And definitely we're also looking forward to the government of Finland decision regarding the commuter traffic reopening between Estonia and Finland. We know that Finnish government going to make the decision on 12th of May, and as Estonian situation is improving and Estonian situation is much better than Swedish situation, then we really hope that Finnish government are going to decide also allow the commuter traffic between Estonia and Finland. Shipping companies and Tallink are ready to control all the certificates which needed and asked before people can enter to our vessels. So our proposal have been, and we know that Shipowners Association in Finland has also proposed to government that government should allow commuter traffic with negative COVID test with at least one dose of vaccine. And when you have certificate that you have had already COVID within 6 months. So I hope that I answered the question. Regarding the passenger capacities, we follow the government's restrictions, so they are different between the countries. But we see that with current restrictions, example in Sweden, it is the 50% capacity. We are able to operate some destinations in Sweden profitably. So we definitely trying to open some cruises for our home markets.
Thank you. And the next question is to a certain extent covering the similar area. Maybe the only additional question, part of the question would be, how far in advance do you have to make the decision to put the ship into operation?
Yeah, as I already answered, then we take some ships into the operations, some cruise ships, not all. And regarding the how far in advance we need to make decisions, actually it can be even less than 1 month. It's more question that how we can make the marketing and sell the tickets. So at least 3 weeks, better 1 month is this period when we would like to do the decision if we're going to open some route during the summer.
Thank you. The next question, please confirm that you actually did not draw any additional amount from the 100 million NIB loan, i.e. still 90 million available. Yes, yes, confirmed. There have been no further disbursements from the remaining 90 million loan facility. The next question, please confirm that the total government assistance in the quarter was 7 million euros, including 4.9 million euros related to the Turku-Stockholm route and/or all salary support. And please specify how much of this is booked under other operating income. So during the quarter, the total impact of government assistance was 7 million euros, and this is divided 2 million arising from the salary support mechanism in Estonia, which was paid directly to the employees and not to the company. And the remaining 5 million euros was support paid to the company. This is relating effectively to the Turku-Stockholm route, and this is reflecting the Swedish government salary support mechanism, as well as the Finnish Traficom support for the Turku-Stockholm route. The next question: do you foresee further employee reduction from the 3,953 seen at the end of Q1?
I will answer that. As we said, that vaccinations are going well. So when we're going to reopen, example, hotels in Estonia, then we don't have right now in our payroll more than 90 workers who are working in the hotels. So definitely when we're going to open the hotels, there will be some increase. Same time, we know that out of this 3,953, this is not the real workload. This is the number of employees we have, but many of them are with lower workload. Example, in Finland, many people are still laid off, and we are not paying the salary. And in Sweden, as we have a Swedish salary support mechanism, our part is to pay partly, and some part coming until end of June from Swedish government. When we going to open or we'll start operations with under the Finnish or Swedish flag, our employees number are not going to increase. When we're going to open or we'll bring back Silja Europa to the traffic between the Helsinki-Tallinn as cruise product, the number of employees are not increasing, but Estonian catering personnel workload going to be raised from 0.8 to 1.0. Currently the 0.8 workload for close to 800 people are agreed until end of May. So from beginning of June we raised that workload and we'll start some operations. And as we don't have enough sea personnel in Estonia for all the ships, working ships, I mean the cargo ships, 2 shuttle vessels, Silja Europa, for the summer period, then we use also some temporary working agreements for the summer period. And when we're developing the Burger King, of course, when we open some new restaurant, there can be some increase of the numbers, but generally we're trying to keep employees number as low as possible and not bringing it back to the pre-COVID levels in coming years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And there is one question has arrived, which I believe perhaps partly already has been answered, but the question is, how are you currently planning the routes for the summer? Is there a date for Stockholm-Helsinki to reopen, and are the dates for the other routes? How will your special routes affect the use of the ships percentage-wise?
Stockholm-Helsinki is a very good question. Yes, as soon as it's possible to start operations between the Helsinki-Stockholm with reasonable restrictions or rules, and when we see that these rules allow us to have enough passengers on board, we are ready to start operations between the Helsinki-Stockholm. We can't say that exact date. It depends more, I think, about situation in Sweden. When we take this 2-week average for 100,000 people, then in Sweden are around level 774 when Finland is in around 70, so 10 times lower. We need to understand what will be the restrictions to return from Sweden to Finland, example, when the Finnish people want to go to Stockholm. So we'll see how the things improving, but we are ready to start operations, at least one, maybe with 2 vessels between the Helsinki Stockholm when restrictions are low.
Thank you. It appears that we have exhausted all the questions for today. The list was today shorter than usual, but I think that's fine. So thank you everyone for participating, and unless there are any more questions, then we will be talking again in 3 months' time when introducing the second quarter results of 21. Thank you and bye.